It's California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Eric Bauman is back. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, vice chair of the California Democratic Party. I want to speak about the next 2 years in our state and our nation. In our state, we continue to have strong Democratic majorities in the Assembly, in the Senate, the governor's mansion as well. Not a two-thirds majority, but still strong majorities. How do you expect Sacramento to operate over the next few years?
I think Sacramento is going to continue to do what it has been doing, which is to move California forward for everyday working Californians. The supermajority has a much smaller impact than most people realize. Okay, they can't override the governor's vetoes. They weren't going to do that anyway.
Right.
They can't raise taxes without a vote of the people. They weren't going to do that anyway.
Right.
We've already shown that fact. They can't put a constitutional amendment on the ballot without signatures. Okay, well, we probably weren't going to do that either.
Right.
So the bottom line is, with our healthy majorities, both in the Assembly and the Senate, we're going to continue to pass progressive legislation that's designed to make life better for Californians. And whether we're talking about health care or civil rights or education, I mean, we're going to keep trying to move this state forward.
What about working with Republicans? You know, I may be Pollyanna, I've said this to you before, but I'm in Sacramento fairly often, and it does seem as if the Democrats and Republicans like each other. They may have policy disagreements, but they get along. They at least attempt to create bipartisan legislation or bipartisan relationships. Is this a snow job? Am I seeing it correctly?
Look, there's not enough camaraderie, but there's more than most people realize. Okay. The problem is that in a public way, if you're a conservative Republican, or let me say this differently, if you're a Republican and you openly embrace anything that looks liberal, you're going to get a primary the next time you run.
Even in California?
Even in California.
Really?
Even in California. And it has prevented a lot of deals from being made. However, it's gotten better from when John Perez became Speaker and appointed 2 Republicans to chair committees,
right.
And now current Speaker Atkins again has appointed Republicans to chair committees. That has helped break the ice.
But what about with open primaries? I mean, isn't it even more difficult for the far fringes of the parties to run?
That is the myth of the open primary. That was the fallacy upon which it was sold to us. It hasn't changed the makeup of the partisan makeup in any way. It has created very expensive Democrat on Democrat and Republican on Republican races. But bottom line is, it really hasn't had the impact. You know, it was going to bring all these independents in and give them an opportunity to vote who hadn't voted in primaries. Well, it didn't. It didn't do any of those things.
I want to talk about one race specifically.
Sure.
And that is the race in the 35th Senate District in Los Angeles. That is the race in which Isidore Hall was successful, a Democrat. The race was held recently. He got his 50% plus one. He is going to the Senate. He will be representing, I think, about 900, if not 1 million people, 900,000 to 1 million people. Isidore Hall got 15,000 votes, and that was 55% of the vote. Sir, what are we doing wrong? I know it's a special election, but for turnout to be 6%, maybe it will creep up to 7 or 8. What are we doing wrong in our democracy?
The voters of California are fatigued. Since the 2000 election, since the 2002 election, we haven't gone a year without an election. And if you live in places like Los Angeles, every month, every other month, there's a special election, there's this kind of election, there's that kind of election, there's a city election. People have had it. And because our media doesn't cover elections, people aren't even aware of what goes on.
Let me ask you this. Should it be that the governor have the power to appoint with a vacancy in the legislature? He has the power to appoint in most supervisorial seats. Why not the legislature? There's an election coming up, especially in the Assembly 2 years later. Why do we have to have an election? I mean, look, you know, intuitively we want an election, a vote of the people, but you know how much it cost for Mr. Hall's race? $2 million. It cost LA County $2 million. Do we need that?
No, actually we don't, and whether the answer is appointment or not, appointment is a way to do it, and you could even do it with parameters. You could
same party.
Same party. You could say the parameters are has to be that the party in question puts forward 3 nominees. I mean, there are ways to do it that would make it seem fairer.
I just, sir, you know, forgive me. I live near Century City, Culver City. This past year, I had to vote in a special election for the California Senate, the California Assembly, the LA City Council, a school board race, and then the regular races. It was maddening. It was. My wife turned to me. She's like, well, "What is going on here? We get a ballot every week."
So you asked the question why people aren't turning out to vote.
Right.
This is one of the reasons right there.
Would the party and your leader in the party support election reform that would allow the governor, and look, like you said, with parameters, it could be you have to pick from the same party, whatever it is.
I think we would certainly entertain these ideas. We would certainly look at them and analyze them. We've talked about them. I happen to be a supporter of this particular reform, so long as there are protections in place.
Well, there aren't for supervisors. You know that. I mean, the governor. Well, I guess
Yes,
supervisors are nonpartisan, but.
Well, and as much as any election is nonpartisan, and it's mythical to say that any election is nonpartisan,
Right.
because if I'm a person who has traditional democratic views, I come in, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-gay rights, I'm pro-environment. If I'm a typical conservative, I'm pro-Second Amendment rights. I'm, so we carry that with us wherever we go. Here's the bottom line: our electoral reforms that we keep making always are little hodgepodge, little nip around the edge, little change here, little change there, and they cost us a lot of money. They further antagonize people, and they don't make the system work better.
Do you think?
Amazingly, while the Congress has a 9% approval rating, the legislature has a 40-something percent approval
And let's
rating.
talk about the Congress, because we know that California, I believe, is the only state in the union where the Democrats gained. The Democrats gained a seat with the Pete Aguilar win in the Inland Empire. Throughout the nation, Republicans did much better. I think they gained about 13 seats, which is not huge on the House side. In the Senate, they did extremely well. We now have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Democratic president. Will we see any movement over the next 2 years?
Let me tell you how things are going to get done for the next 2 years. They're going to get done by the president's executive order, and they're going to get done by the president's veto.
Is that what we want?
Because to be clear, Boehner and McConnell have said they're not about compromise. The agenda that they're looking to advance is a traditional conservative.
But why does that seem to be successful? In California, my perception is that would not work. That if any of our leaders said, we're not going to compromise, Democrat or Republican, we just wouldn't have it. Why is that effective in Washington?
Well, but because the way our elections are constructed, how the outcome of these elections is shaped by, first of all, the gerrymandering of districts in the House, and in the Senate, it's the luck of the draw which seats are up. The Republicans had the luck, the Democrats had to defend over 20 seats. Shoes on the other foot next election. And it's a presidential year. Democrats vote in presidential years. And when you think about the fact that Democratic voters, by and large, are working men and women who have to, spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day working, it's hard to get to the polls.
Well,
presidential election, they go and they vote.
Why, sir? I mean, if anything, working men and women have more of a stake in an election, and yet they're not voting.
I always say it this way. If you live in Palmdale and you clean hotel rooms in Santa Monica, by the time you make your hour-and-a-half drive to work in the morning, work your 8.5-hour day, and make your hour-and-a-half drive home at the end of the day, who's going to stand in line and vote?
We have easy vote by mail.
We have easy
access.
vote by mail, and it's a lot of work to get that conversion to occur. And by the way, in some counties in California, you have 40% of the people signed up to vote by mail. And in other counties, in Los Angeles County, we had to fight years of inaction at the registrar's office till we got a new registrar who believes in vote by mail to make that change, and slowly the numbers are creeping up. But you know what? It's great to put a ballot in somebody's hand. That's the first step. But for political leaders, for people who are running campaigns, putting the ballot in their hands is not enough. You actually got to get them to cast that vote, and people have to use their voice.
His name is Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. He is the vice chair of the California Democratic Party. And I'm Brad Pomerance, and it's California Edition.